how you guys want me to come back to YouTube, huh? Doing response videos? Is that it? Huh? Okay, fine. This will be a response video to the Garage Autonomist in regards to a video on Meghan Murphy's channel where she talks to a lawyer representing three wax ladies who are being sued by one Jessica Yaniv. I think I'm pronouncing that right. I hope so. If you've been living under a rock for the past couple of days, Jessica Yaniv is the trans woman who is suing a trio of wax peoples, you know, the people who do waxing at beauty salons. She's taken them to court for discrimination for not waxing her because she's a trans woman, for being a pre-op trans woman. And when I saw Garage Autonomous make this comment, he called Meghan Murphy one of his favorite thinkers. If you don't know about Meghan Murphy, she's the creator of a website, Feminist Current. She is also a TERF, a trans-exclusionary reductive feminist. The R is usually supposed to stand for radical feminist, but there's nothing radical about being a bigot, so reductive. Reductive also in the sense that her definition of being a woman and womanhood essentially comes down to what's on your chest and what's between your legs. So biological essentialism. So yes, reductive. Anyway, I was concerned, so I had replied asking him, if his comment was sarcasm. And he said that when he said that he thinks that she's a great thinker, he's talking about her gender critical work. Is she exclusionary? I'm going to put you guys I'm going to put game on you guys. Anytime someone says that they are gender critical, 9 times out of 10, they're transmesic or transphobic. I don't use phobic as a suffix anymore because it means fear. And when it comes to bigotry, people aren't afraid. They just don't like whichever marginalized group they don't like for whatever reason. Hence the suffix mesia, which means hate or strong dislike or pathological hatred of. So, but anyway, it seems like live responses to videos are all the rage now on YouTube these days, so I guess I figured I'd give it a try. So let's see. I'm gonna cast this video.
Service is going to be provided, and so
sorry, I'm gonna start it over from the beginning. Turn on Wi-Fi on my cell phone. Shit. Hold on a second. Let me dismiss this alarm because I don't want alarms going off while I'm trying to do this. So cast this. You're just gonna hear the audio because I'm not rich enough to do screen capture. So
a significant proportion of men become sexually aroused and get an erection.
Hold on, just had to rewind it.
First of all, what is the Human Rights Tribunal for? You know, why would somebody bring a complaint to the Human Rights Tribunal, for example, instead of going through the regular court system?
So,
first of all, what is the Human Rights Tribunal for? You know, why would somebody bring a
Hold on, I'm trying to. There we go. I wanted to start from the beginning.
First of all, what is
so it is the beginning.
What is the
All right.
Human Rights Tribunal for? You know, why would somebody bring a complaint to the Human Rights Tribunal, for example, instead of going through the regular court system?
So the BC government had repealed the Human Rights Tribunal. It had gotten rid of it, but now it's brought it back. And what it is a tribunal to adjudicate grievances between members of the public. So people who say that they've been discriminated against either in employment or service or in a publication. Those are the primary functions. And
Okay, so it looks like I guess that the Human Tribunal seems like it's the Canadian equivalent to civil court. Looks like so.
grounds are typically for complaints or
Actually, sorry. Before I fully get into it, just off the title of the video, you can pretty much ascertain where Meghan Murphy's thoughts lie in regards to trans women. Can women legally be compelled to handle male genitals? Now, if you are trans exclusive and you understand that that arbitrary markers created by society don't dictate what a man is or what a woman is, or shouldn't be, you know, compulsory, there really isn't a need to use terms like male and female in regards to genitals. You could just say genitals. And can women be legally be compelled to handle women? We can't be legally compelled to handle anything that we don't want to handle, really. So the title really stands out as somewhat of a loaded question. So let's continue though.
you know, racism, sexism, you know, discrimination on any of these enumerated grounds that our society is very woke about these days.
Right. Yes, we sure are. And so, how do cases end up there? Like, does anyone who files a complaint about discrimination get a hearing?
No, so there's a process, there's a preliminary process by which the tribunal takes a look at any complaints that have come in, and they decide whether or not they're going to allow those to proceed. And so they make a preliminary analysis, and they say, you know, this has merit on its face, or this doesn't have merit. And then they allow it to proceed, or they reject it. So in the cases that we're going to talk about, obviously the complaints were allowed to proceed.
Right. So, I mean, I think that some people, I mean, I've seen quite a few comments online, for example, from people who are wondering why this particular case actually went through. I mean, on what basis did the tribunal decide that the complaints Jessica/Jonathan Yaniv was filing were legit?
So the tribunal in a May 30th decision said that on its face that Yaniv has a case. And so they made that determination at the outset. And I mean, it may have been before all of the evidence was in. Of course, it was before all of the evidence was in, and you know, no hearing had taken place, but that was what they did at the outset.
Well, isn't that kind of what happens in preliminary hearings? You decide, folks decide whether the plaintiff has a case or not. So of course, folks would decide to go along with the case on the basis of it, because from the plaintiff's complaint, it's a pretty straightforward accusation of discrimination on the basis of gender identity, on the basis of Jessica being a trans woman. So there we have it. I'm wondering what this guy means in regards to before all the evidence was present. What evidence exactly?
So,
And what exactly is he claiming? So, now that, I understand that he's...
What exactly is he claiming? Misgendering Jessica Yaniv. This is a really big thing in regards to people who are trans-exclusionary. Folks who are trans-exclusionary do not accept trans folks as the gender that they identify with. Hence, Meghan referring to Jessica as a he instead of a she. But, gender critical.
Claiming he was discriminated against based on gender identity, but is he saying that these women, these estheticians, refuse to service him because he's transgender, because he identifies as transgender? How does that exactly work?
so when you submit a complaint to the tribunal, you have to say on what ground you're making the complaint. And Yaniv's complaints are all on the ground of gender identity or gender expression. I think that one of them was actually on the ground of sex as well. But for the purposes of the three cases that have become news stories, the complaints are under the ground of gender identity and gender expression. So what that means is that when the complainant came and asked my clients for Brazilian, which is a service that they provide to women out of their house, because they operate out of their houses, what Yaniv is contending is that they said no based on either the complainant's identity, gender identity, or gender expression. And so,
see how actually, let's see what this guy's name here is. Jay Cameron. He's doing the smart thing by referring to Jessica as the complainant, or using pronouns they, which for the most part are pretty safe if you're not sure on what a trans person, trans folk, or gender non-conforming folks, if you're not sure which pronouns they use, they is a safe one to use. And he's basically using they to cover his ass. But as you can see from Meghan's responses, she refers to Jessica as he. She doesn't give a shit. She's fully trans music.
So those are two separate things. Gender identity is how you think of yourself, how you identify yourself, and your expression is how you express to the public. And so it's important to note that when you approached my clients, the complainant was identifying as female, according to Yaniv, but expressing as male. They perceived somebody who was male, right? The name that they saw on Facebook Marketplace was a male name and, a more or less stereotypical male appearance. And so that was something that was confusing to them, because then the complainant said, I'm a woman. And go ahead.
Oh, the whole thing is confusing. The way that it's being framed in general is confusing, because from what you're telling me, it sounds like it would have made more sense to file a complaint based on sex, to say that these female estheticians then were discriminating against him because he's male, because he has a...
Again. And also in regards to, I'm not quite sure of the details, and also remember he's representing the estheticians, and they could be lying, because in regards to, because when it comes to trans folks, there is a thing where I've seen this happen. There is a thing where not every trans person can quote unquote pass as the gender that they identify with. So folks who are bigoted will still refer to them as the gender that they're transitioning from. regardless of what the trans person identifies as. So in regards to this claim of the waxing gals, of them being confused because, you know, Yaniv came to them and looking like a male or a man, but saying I'm a woman. He could be lying for his clients, and the clients could be lying because, again, folks who dismiss trans identity will often not care about what trans folks identify as, because, as I said, not everyone can pass for what's, you know, seen by society as, you know, looking like a man or looking like a woman, you know, which is totally based on physical characteristics and features. So let's continue.
Body. I mean, it wouldn't have been, I mean, they wouldn't have known anything about his gender expression based on the profiles he was using on Facebook Marketplace, right?
So, Facebook Marketplace. So, I mean, they could be lying about this too. At the same time, I am aware of the checkered history of Jessica Yaniv and the really creepy and, you know, just being a sexual predator before she transitioned and everything like that. So it is quite possible that she's a liar as well in regards to when she made those appointments via, I guess, Facebook Marketplace. I wasn't even aware that you can make waxing appointments via the marketplace. I do know that if businesses that have Facebook pages, and if their call to action is, you know, check out our website or make an appointment, then I guess they can make an appointment through that. But yeah, this all sounds really iffy, and like I said, the estheticians could be lying, but Jessica could be lying also.
Yeah, so the expression was stereotypically male. That was how my clients perceived Yaniv. And but Yaniv is saying, I identify as a woman. But the problem with this case is that how you identify doesn't change your physiology. So sex is a separate ground under Section 8 of the BC Human Rights Code. And Yaniv has brought these complaints on the ground of gender identity or gender expression. So how you identify doesn't change your physiology. Right? I could identify however I want in my head, but it doesn't change my body, it doesn't change my genitals, right? I could identify.
This is often another complaint that gender critical, aka trans music people use. Well, you know, I can identify as, you know, I can identify as whatever in my mind. It doesn't change, you know, it doesn't change what's on the outside, what's between my legs, etc., etc. And it's also very it's also pretty repugnant, because it basically reduces being transgender just to something that folks just think in their head, not something very much, you know, physiologically and psychologically complex and nuanced, as all things are, as you know, biology and, you know, sexuality and identity. There's so many layers to all of this, and for Mr. Cameron to just dismiss it as, oh, well, you know, I can, you know, think I'm anything I want in my head, but that doesn't change what what my genitals are or what I look like, you know. And as I said before, again, I still have to bring up the concept of, you know, of passing privilege. not all trans folks have it, so again, he could be lying that Yaniv showed up looking stereotypically like a man, but telling the estheticians that he's a woman, that she is a woman. And on the other hand, yes, it is possible that Jessica showed up there, not necessarily looking stereotypically like a woman, but 9 times out of 10 when it comes to cases like this, as I said, folks who dismiss trans identity will not care about any of those things, whether the trans person is transitioning or not. If they are like, oh well, that's just that's a man trying to look like a woman, then yeah. So yeah, again, they could be lying. Jessica could be lying. I'm a bit more inclined to believe Jessica on this point. But again, her past is sketchy too, and she is a predator. But that doesn't mean that being trans music is okay. That being trans music towards her is okay. And thinking, oh, well, see this case, and oh, she's a predator, therefore all trans women, all trans people, and all these, gender non-binary motherfuckers are predators. No. It's still not right. And it is still, yes, it's still trans misogyny.
As a tomato, it doesn't make me physiologically a tomato.
Yeah, just because, I can think I'm a tomato, but that doesn't physiologically make me a tomato. Yeah, way to go to diminish trans identity to just something that I think of myself in my head.
And that's really one of the big issues with this case, because Yaniv is on the record as saying that they have male genitals, penis and testicles. So
again, if you are cognizant of trans issues, and if you accept trans people as human beings and as the gender that they identify, and if you understand how complex biology and sexuality are, if you accept how complex these things are, there's really no need to operate via the binaries of male and female, man and woman. You understand that these are all social constructs that we created to make sense, to try to make sense of what we see in the world, and that there's always room for updating knowledge. So there's really no need to go by the male and female binaries when talking about human genitals. You can just say genitals.
That's a service that my clients don't provide. They do not wax that body part, irrespective of somebody's identity. That's the case.
And I mean, as far as I'm aware, the process of waxing male genitals is quite different than the process of waxing, like, giving a woman a Brazilian bikini wax. That would be a different service. Is that right?
I think it's significantly different. So, we advanced an expert who talked about what the process is in waxing male genitalia. This woman operates a salon on the island, and all she does is wax male genitalia all day long. That's all her salon does. And so she talked in very explicit detail about what the process is and how it's different from waxing female genitalia. And there's obvious differences. For example, they use a different technique. They use a different wax for male and female genitals. And, physiologically, there are different reactions when you handle male and female genitals. I mean, there's a physiological reality. So somebody who is providing the service has to handle the client's penis and testicles for an extended period of time, from between 20 minutes to an hour. And according to the expert, a significant proportion of men become sexually aroused and get an erection, and then a significant portion of those men want sexual services. And so, it seems like there is some expectation, even in the industry, that service is going to be provided. And some men who attend a different salon that doesn't provide that service become quite belligerent, angry, aggressive. And according to the expert, she's had to go in and rescue her staff from aggressive men who want, they want a hand job in the room, following their brozillion or their manzillion. And that's not something my clients are comfortable with. They work out of their own home. They don't want a naked man, irrespective of how the individual identifies, right? They don't want a person with male biological genitals naked in their home because they're not comfortable for a variety of reasons.
Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Okay, so let's break this down. Portions of that explanation from the expert that Mr. Cameron says that he talked to is fucking irrelevant. Okay? And it only serves to illuminate more on casual bigotry towards trans people. And as far as penises are concerned, penis gets erect from like a cloth brushing against it. So of course, if someone is doing something around it, like waxing for like he even said 20 minutes to an hour, yes, of course things are gonna happen. The only real reason to bring up the issue that some men or a significant portion of men will try to get the esthetician to give them a happy ending or whatever. The only reason why a person would bring that up is to push the narrative of women with penises being sexual predators, or saying that or illuminating that his clients carry the perspective of anyone with a penis and testicles in that position would be be a predator and try to take advantage of women waxing said genitals. So, gosh, this is just, and like, dude, Meghan's not talking much. She's interviewing the guy, but she obviously agrees with what he's saying. She's not saying, hey, well, whoa, wait a second. This doesn't mean, that she's not correcting him in anything. She agrees with the narrative that he is pushing. That anyone with a penis and testicles, including trans women, are susceptible to being sexual predators in a waxing situation. Like, god damn, how much more of this shit do I have to go? Let me see, because I tried watching this before, but it just, oh my god, I'm only fucking 9 minutes into this shit, and this is an almost 30-minute video. I don't know if I can make it through. But I got time before I have to go out and do stuff, so let me see.
Yeah, and so what it sounds like is, really what it comes down to is that Yaniv was asking women to touch his penis. It's almost like he was asking for sexual services.
And there you have it. How the fuck did I know? How did you know, Jasmine? How did you know that Meghan was gonna go that route? How did you know? How'd you know that shit? Just God. Like, do I even have to reiterate how seriously fucked and asinine and insane that is? And again, yes, I know about Jessica's past before she transitioned. I saw the screenshots of all the, pedophilic messages, or I think they were either Facebook messages or tweets. I can't remember, but I did see the screenshots. They were very, very, very fucking creepy. And also there were screenshots of him saying some racially bigoted things. So yes, Jessica Yaniv is no angel. At the same time, Meghan has no problem with using Jessica as an example to continue to push the narrative that in the end trans women are just out here to make cis women to put cis women in a position to do all sorts of things that we apparently don't want to do. And this is just another example of using the case of one trans woman to essentially paint all trans women as sexual predators, which is transmesia. I feel I'm just going to be repeating myself all throughout this thing. And yeah, I'm only fucking 9 minutes, 13 seconds in. Shit.
I don't know what Yaniv's expectation was regarding the service, and that's not in evidence, but certainly if you're asking somebody to give you a Brazilian wax and you have male genitals, they're going to have to touch your penis. And not just touch it, once. And then they're done, right? I mean, they're going to have to hold it, basically, for an extended period of time. And that's what the service calls for. And that's an important detail in this case.
Yeah.
Why is it an important detail? Why? Especially for trans women, when it comes, especially like with most pre-op trans women, or, trans women who, because let's be real, not everyone can afford reassignment surgery. Sometimes the costs are extremely prohibitive. So most times, most trans women can do is, continue to take hormones and to transition, into the gender that they identify with. So, and most times, thanks to hormone replacement therapy, a penis essentially becomes useless in some regards. So all this worrying about like, oh, you have to be handling the penis for a certain time, you're gonna have to touch it for a certain time or whatever. Yes, just like when a woman with a vagina gets waxed, like fucking the esthetician is all up in our vaginas, like moving the labia, moving the lips around, and asking us to like hold something and stretch and and hold your legs a certain way so they can wax your ass and all sorts of shit. So yes, like if you're a wax esthetician, you're gonna be touching genitals, regardless of what type, regardless of whether it's a penis and testicles or a vagina. They have to get all up in your shit, especially for a Brazilian. You're basically getting all your hair fucking taken off. So this is a fucking non sequitur. It's not important. It probably functions more as a red herring because they're trying to, they're fucking concern trolling about, oh, touching a penis, like, yeah, and and if anything, it's not only misogynistic towards trans women, and actually no, it's pretty much mostly trans misogynistic, but in another way, it's also very misandrist in a way, because it basically reduces men down to whatever genitals they have as well, especially when, cis men with penises, like, oh, they're going to be touching your penis for a certain time and you're going to get hard, so, you just can't, just can't control yourself, you're just going to, you're going to, you're going to be aroused, da 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 da. Yeah, of course, that's what happens. Again, like, it takes literally nothing for a penis to get erect. You know what I'm saying? Take a feather and fucking brush a feather across a penis and it will get hard. Like, it's just, it's nothing. It's fucking concern trolling just to continue to push a trans music narrative. God damn it.
So have you ever dealt with a case like this before? I mean, maybe like a case, I don't know what it would be comparable, like maybe sex description.
And also listen to Meghan as she continues to misgender Jessica. And the reason I kept rewinding or trying to rewind back to the beginning of the video, because when I had first started watching it, and I had watched the introduction of it, when she was talking about Jessica, she referred to Jessica by the name that she used to have before she transitioned, which is called dead naming, which is a huge no-no. So, like, if you really want to show how much you hate trans women, besides voting in politicians who enact legislation that disenfranchise them from basic human rights, call a trans person by their old name, aka their dead name, and they will, do that and continue to and misgender them. You've pretty much let it be known where you stand in regards to their humanity. And Meghan does that all throughout. She's done it in like so many times, and I'm only 9 minutes into like an almost 30-minute video. So she doesn't give a fuck. She doesn't care. She's trans-exclusionary. She's always been trans-exclusionary. And anybody who's been following her work for so long, especially when she's, quote, gender critical and hasn't picked up on this, then I'm sorry. I've really got to question where your stances lie in regards to trans people. Period.
Discrimination, like where a man is saying he wants a service and he's not able to get that service because he's a man, or where somebody was discriminated against, because of how they looked, like, maybe a man was wearing traditional female clothes or something like that. Like, has there been anything else like this in Canadian history or that you've dealt with?
Specifically dealing with waxing services, no, there's never been anything like it. There was a comparable case in Ontario where
I also want to say that in regards to the aestheticians, with them doing, Jay Cameron said that they do these services out of their home. So what I'm thinking is that since it's probably harder for trans women, it's harder for women with penises to go to places. It's hard for them to find beauty places where they can get their genitals waxed and not be ostracized. And maybe in looking these women up, Jessica thought, oh, they do these services out of their home, so it's just a one-on-one situation. I can go there and I can be safe. Because that's, pretty much when you're part of a marginalized group, there's really only so many places that you can go to get whatever services you need. Sometimes there just aren't any places that you can go, and folks have to actually actually have to start offering services to other members of their community, because there is no place in there's no place in mainstream society that they can go to access these services. So I could see Jessica looking these people up and finding out, oh, they do these services out of their home, so there's probably not a lot of people around. It's probably a safe place for me to go and get these services and not be discriminated against. I can sort of see that being her rationale for seeking out these women. I could also understand, even though it's bigoted as hell, I can see the rationale of the women. If they're doing this out of their home, they're letting in folks that they don't know, doing this service, and someone comes to them, and as I said, in their mind, it's possible that regardless of how Jessica presented herself, they don't care. They still see a man saying that in their mind, they're saying this is a man saying that he's a woman. And I think Jay Cameron also said that that these women were sort of against these things for maybe a variety of things, especially like for religious reasons, because I think if they're I could sort of see that if they're Muslim, there might be a problem with having a man that they're not married to or related to in any way in their house or something like that. So I could see that. It's still bigoted as hell, though.
A doctor was approached by somebody who had a vaginoplasty, and they wanted some work on the labia, and the doctor said, I can't, because that tissue is different from a natural labia, and so I'm not comfortable working on it. I'm not trained to work on it. And so the individual filed a complaint at the Human Rights Tribunal in Ontario, and the case went to court, I understand, and the tribunal found for the doctor, because there was a bona fide occupational issue, right? The doctor was not trained to work on that tissue, is different tissue, right? It had been surgically altered, wasn't biologically natural female genitalia. And
biologically natural female genitalia. Way to go to pretty much, way to go to just further hammer in the idea that trans women, or just being trans in general, is unnatural. It's biologically unnatural. Now, he could have made the case for that without using such language, transmusic language. He could have just said, oh, the doctor doesn't have the training to deal with those types of situations. Because it's true, not every doctor has the training to deal with trans women, to deal with trans folks, especially trans folks who get a certain amount of reassignment surgery done. And to that, I would say that we need that. That is a need. That is something just like with if you're a graphic designer and you're trained with a certain specific skill set, but you're seeing now how the landscape has changed, and you need to add more skills and learn more software to add it to your repertoire. That's a simple solution right there. If you want to stay competitive, if you want to be of use, if you want to be able to help more people, You have to add on skills and grow and adapt as you go along in your practice. And it's the same for doctors. We need doctors. We need more doctors who are knowledgeable in all aspects of human biology, especially once it's been cosmetically altered for whatever reason. Sorry for these long pauses, but like every time I stop to pause, my phone turns off, and that's what I'm using to cast this video.
So, if you take that case and you apply it to this case, you would think that because this isn't a service that these women offer, they're not trained, right? And the expert also talked about how, somebody who doesn't know what they're doing can tear male tissue because it's thinner, and so you can tear the scrotum and cause, extensive bleeding and significant pain. And so you would think that it's a good thing that somebody who doesn't provide the service and is upfront, but they don't provide that service, you would think that they would be acclaimed, not castigated. But
yeah, I mean,
yeah, it's also possible that the estheticians didn't express that in that sort of way. Just, I'm sorry, just like, I'm sorry, we don't wax those types of genitals or whatever. Like we don't like those kind of genitals around here. So I partially agree in the sense that if the refusal was more based on a concern of, hey, if I were an esthetician, I'd be like, and in that position, like, hey, I'm sorry, but I am only proficient in waxing women with vaginas. I have no idea how to wax a woman with a penis, and since I don't know how to do that, I'm suggesting that you try to find a place that does, because I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to give you a bad wax, and I don't, like no business wants, a 1-star rating because, they tore somebody's skin or did damage to somebody's genitals or whatever. So I can understand the apprehension of, not wanting to wax someone who has penis and testicles, because you don't want to do any tissue damage. So that's fine. That's definitely understandable. However, 9 times out of 10, when it comes to refusal of service, it doesn't really go surface deep. So I mean, when it comes to refusal of service to marginalized groups, it doesn't go deeper than that, and it's usually on whatever counsel that the defendants get, who they try to make that case. So he made it, but he made it in a pretty bigoted way.
In your own best interest, in a way.
Sure. Yeah.
Do you think, so I was over in the UK sort of recently talking to, the public and some politicians, because in places like Scotland and Britain, they are looking at new or, updating their gender identity legislation. And so they wanted to hear about what was happening in Canada. And so a lot of people ask me, if all of this stuff that's going on, people over there had heard about this Yaniv case, despite the fact that our media is not covering it. So they wanted to know, if this kind of thing is a direct result of Bill C-16. It was hard for me to answer because it's not clear in the law, what's legal and what's illegal. It's not like that law says you can't refer to a man who identifies as a trans woman as he, for example. So,
hold on one second. Let me, time to hit the Googles. Bill C. 16, oh, here we go. Bill C-16, Canada. Let's see, Wikipedia. Yeah, all you haters who are like, oh, Wikipedia is not a source. It is still a good go-to source. And then if you want more information, you can check the sources that they cite at the bottom if you want more information, or you know what else came up on your Google search. Okay, let's see, by Wiki. An act to amend the Canadian Human Rights Act and the Criminal Code is a law passed by the Parliament of Canada. The law adds gender expression and gender identity as protected grounds to the Canadian Human Rights Act, and also to the Criminal Code provisions dealing with hate propaganda, incitement to genocide, and aggravating factors in sentencing. Let's see, introduction. Let's see what the summary is. Okay. Let's see. The bill is intended to protect individuals from discrimination within the sphere of federal jurisdiction and from being the targets of hate propaganda as a consequence of their gender identity or gender expression. Let's see. It also adds that evidence that an offense was motivated by bias, prejudice, or hate based on a person's gender identity or expression constitutes an aggravating circumstance for a court to consider whether imposing a criminal sentence. They summarize the bill. Let me see. Amendments to the Criminal Code. Let's see. Lawmen promote genocide. Okay. Okay. Let's see, Jordan. Of course. Yeah. Oh, right. This is the bill that Jordan Peterson got all in a hubbub about. Peterson argued that the law would classify the failure to use preferred pronouns of transgender people as hate speech, saying that it would compel speech. According to legal experts, not using preferred pronouns would not meet legal standards for hate speech. So, I mean, there's nothing really to like worry about there. You know, you can go on, misgendering folks. You can go on, misgendering them, but let's say if you decide as an employer, if you decide to cut their hours or fire them or continually harass them on the basis of their gender identity and gender expression, then you can face punitive charges. I wouldn't say that, I don't know if not referring to someone as their gender program as hate speech. There's a specific definition for hate speech. So yeah. So I mean, no one's come to, no Canadian official has come to Meghan's door to, slap charges on her for continuing to misgender trans women. So please, Meghan, stop it.
It's what is the law? How much impact did Bill C-16 have on this case and on the ability of Yaniv to come forward with these complaints and have these complaints treated legitimately?
So there's no doubt that Bill C-16, which is federal legislation, and then you have all the provincial human rights legislation, there's no doubt that that has had an impact on other provinces who are looking at adopting these similar laws. As far as what law came first, I I don't recall specifically, but the fact is that this has become a significant issue in Canada, and the law provides very little guidance. Like, for example, you referenced the use of pronouns, right? You know, from time immemorial, since there was an English language, when you say she, that is referring to somebody who has a biological there's a biological component to the use of that word. She means something. It refers to biological women, right? And up until, you know, the 1950s or 1960s, there was no contention that anybody was anything but, because, you know, science had not progressed to the point where you could remove sexual organs and replace them with a semblance of something else, right? And so the word she has always meant woman, and woman is a thing. Just like going back to my tomato example,
Your tomato example is flawed and bigoted. Trans people have always existed, even before there was a name for it. Like, gosh, so many of these things can just, God, first trans. Yeah, let's see, first trans person is, yeah, like, they've been around for the longest, but according to, let's see, European transgender people have been present in the land now known as the United States, at least since the early 1600s. Before Western contact. Let's see. Actually, hold on, sorry. Yeah, before Western contact, some Native American tribes had third gender people whose social roles varied from tribe to tribe. This is not an alien concept. This is not something that just came into existence like through the 1950s and 1960s. Trans folk and even, you know, gender non-conforming folk, they've been here the whole time. Just like other things, just like, you know, sexual fluidity, just like how it's been present in over 700 species, including humans, since the beginning of time. Like, these differences have always been there. It's just that in human history, a lot of times we created binaries, and anything that fell outside of the binaries we created was treated as abnormal. That's it. And there's really no, this, like, and again, if you have no problem affirming the humanity of these people, you will have no issue with the updating of meanings of things. Words, yes, words mean things. Words mean a lot of things. You know, like, you know, like, just because they're, like, nowadays there's no reason to get up in arms that the word she isn't, you know, doesn't have to be associated with what you, with how you were born in the world as, what you presented as to the world when, you know, when you popped out your mama. Like, and just the fact that, you know, with this talk, like, he's just making a big deal out of it and trying to bring it back to his, you know, to his tomato comparison, again, is completely reductive and completely bigoted. And it's just, God, it just pisses me off. You know, it boggles my mind and pisses me off. Like, Jesus, like, and folks wouldn't be so mad about this if they didn't have such an investment in the perpetuation of the status quo, because, you know, because as humans, yes, we have a tendency to want things chopped down to their simplest elements so that we can assimilate them easier. And that's fine. Like, I get it. There's lots of things that in life that I want, that I like, simplified too. But life isn't like that all the time. A lot of times when it comes to issues with us, especially human beings, they are very complex and very nuanced, and it's very intellectually lazy to complain like, oh, until the 1950s or whatever, so when you said she, it means that you presented as a biological female, as a woman, da 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 da. Like, who cares, my dude? Who cares? Why do you care? Why is change so frightening to people like these? I think I could tell you with Meghan, because there's a certain amount of, even though she's a woman, she still has a certain amount of privilege because she's a white woman. So, and sadly, even within marginalized groups, there is this compulsion to want to be that group at the expense of other groups. You see that in ethnic groups. You see that within the LGBT umbrella with how the L and the G treat the B and the T and the Q and the I and the A, asexual, agender. So, it just, oh God.
Right? Tomato is a thing, right? If I say tomato, you instantly get an image in your head of a round, red, firm fruit. And so words mean something. And so, the law...
tomato is a fruit, yes. It's complex, but not as complex as human beings are, Jay.
Law doesn't say you have to use a pronoun to describe a male who identifies a woman and use the same pronoun for that individual as you do for women. It doesn't say that. But, that's what some individuals want. And so that's creating a complicating factor in society.
Mm-hmm.
And so...
It's only complicated if you don't accept the existence of trans people. That's it. That's the only complication. If you're a bigot, that's it. That's it. It's really not complicated to call people what they tell you to call them. Really, it really isn't. Like, why, it's the same with fucking, when dudes refer to women, when men refer to women as females. Oh, you females. They're only saying it because, we've gotten on them for calling us bitches. But we already know you're calling us females in place of bitches. So it's, and it all comes down to, and we know it comes back to how you feel about women. You hate women. You don't think of certain women, especially black women and maybe other non-black women of color. You don't think of us as actual women. So you don't respect us. You hate us. So you don't think we're human. You don't think we're human enough to, to validate being called women. So you call us females. And it's like, female what, motherfucker? Like, a female lion, a female tiger, a fucking gazelle. Like, but I digress. I'm sorry. It is not complicated to refer to someone what they tell you to refer them as. The only way it's complicated is if you do not accept the existence and the humanity of the person. And that is it. And comparing it to, oh, I wouldn't call a tomato or a banana. Really? Really, motherfucker? You're a lawyer. You're supposed to be smart in some capacity. And you make this non sequitur comparison of accepting the existence of trans people to not calling a tomato a tomato. Like, Jesus. Like, whose man's is this?
My advice to the UK is to be careful about how they go about legislating this issue.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like the Canadian government really didn't think this through at all.
I can understand that sentiment.
You would.
So what will this...
She would. But anyway, so it's federal law, right? And I'd have to do some more researching into this. So Bill C-16 is a federal law, right? So it goes for all of Canada, but it seems like it's up to when Jay said that each of the Canadian provinces are deciding how to how to put that law, I guess, into their province as a part of their province legislatures. So it seems like the Canadian government kind of functions like how the U.S. government is in regards to how we have federal, state, and cities when it comes to the actual levels. And yes, something can be a law federally, but the states each have their own, the states can choose how to deal with that federal legislation. Like, abortion is legal federally in all 50 states or 51 states, whatever. Abortion is legal in all 50 states federally. It's federally legal, but we all know that in the majority of states, criminalize it after a certain amount of weeks. After a short amount of weeks, it is criminalized. It is illegal, or they just flat out abolish it in each state. Period. So what I'm getting is that while Bill C-16, while it's federal and it's a federal law in Canada, but each province can choose to enact it or not. And if they're going to enact it, then how they're going to enact it. So maybe in one province they may have it where, misgendering someone and dead naming someone can be a civil offense, and can be a civil offense. Or what I'm mostly thinking is that each province can decide, each province could probably go along the route of actual shit. Like, if a store refuses you service because of your gender identity and expression, just like with civil rights legislation, you can't come to this establishment, you can't shop at this establishment, you can't eat at this establishment, you can't work for this company because of your race, your gender identity and expression, or your religion. So all this concern trolling about, they're not really sure about C-16, they didn't make it specific, blah blah blah. They probably left it broad for a reason, to allow the provinces to decide how best to go about it. Some people may find that complicated. It's really not a big deal. It's not a hill to die on. But these two have decided to die upon it. So
what will the result of this case, or the outcome of this case, determine, really?
So one of the key questions is what service can somebody who is providing a service of this kind of intimate nature, because it is an intimate service, right? It's not like, you're selling hamburgers at a baseball game, right? I mean, this is a woman who works out of her home in a room. She's, my clients are either single or they're married and their husband is away. They've got small kids in the home. They're alone. They're vulnerable. They're providing a service for women, for biological women. That's their perception. And so one of the big questions in this case is whether or not this.
Yes, and it's a bigoted perception for biological women. So what are trans women? Non-biological women, or biologically abnormal women? Like, what the fuck are you trying to say here, Jay? Cameron?
State can compel that woman to wax and provide an intimate service for somebody who identifies as a woman but who has male genitals, right, who is biologically male, right? Can the state compel that service? Will it compel that service? And if the woman refuses, will she be punished for it?
Lord, this is kind of sounding like, can the state, it's like you can pretty much replace the terms that he's using with any other marginalized group or any other protected class, and it would not fly with anyone who wasn't bigoted. It wouldn't fly with anyone who wasn't bigoted. But because it's a trans woman, then, and of course you bring up male genitals and, these are women, these are single women, they're either single or they have a husband and their husband's away at the time, they have children, so they have small children in the home, they're operating out of their home, and they're vulnerable. And the thing that I hate about, the thing that makes it's always when truths are used to facilitate perpetuation of a bigoted narrative that's the most insidious. That's what makes the situation even more odious and just downright disgusting. Like, you have no problem using these women and their status as a shield, as a cover for bigoted behavior. And that's what it really comes down to these days, because at least maybe in Canada, I don't know about the States, because everyone is saying the quiet parts loud down here these days, but at least in Canada, it seems like folks are they're still trying to keep the quiet parts quiet, aka obfuscate their bigotry behind, concern trolling for the poor women, for the poor single or married women whose husbands are away, and this person comes into their home with these male genitals and they don't know what's gonna happen. Can the state compel them? Can the state make them provide this service to these predatory male genitals? Shoot me, someone. Someone just shoot me. I'm done. I'm done. Just kidding. Please don't kill me. I like life. Anyway, yeah, it's just, it's such a loaded question, and I can understand why Meghan chose it for the title of her video. It's a loaded question. It's meant to evoke a very strong emotional response to override a person's common sense and empathy. So, no, women cannot be compelled to do anything. Well, when it comes to, if you are a business person, if you are a provider of a service, you cannot refuse service from a person. You can't refuse a person's service on the basis of race, gender, sexual identity, or gender, race, gender identity, gender expression, sexual identity, religious affiliation. That's really what it comes down to. The way that they're framing these arguments are the same way that certain libertarians frame their disagreement with the Civil Rights Act in the 1960s. Like, oh, you're making these businesses provide services to to folks, and you're taking away their liberties to refuse people service or whatever. Yeah. Majority of the time, businesses are utilizing public property. So yes, they must provide services to the public, which includes us, the darkies, and and the gays, and the bis, and the lesbians, and the trans people, and gender, and the NBs. Like, sorry, if you don't want to provide service to us, close up shop and then go to a state that still has a sundown town and set up shop there. So then you won't have to worry about servicing all of us. God, I'm digressing again. But there are just so many parallels between this case and the history of discrimination and oppression down here in the States. And like I said, swap in a trans person, swap in woman with penis and testicles with any other protected class, and it would not fly in Canada. But because it's a woman with a penis and testicles, apparently, and like I said, anyone with a penis and testicles is automatically prone to being a predator of women. Yeah. Kind of misandrist, don't you think? So no, as women, we can't be compelled to do anything we don't want to do. But if you are going to provide a service, then yes, you are not allowed to discriminate on the basis of gender identity and expression. Period.
Right? To what extent will she be punished for it? These are important questions that are going to be adjudicated for the first time in the country, and they're big questions.
I don't necessarily think, I get the feeling that should Jessica win the case, I get the feeling that it may be something along having to pay a fine or something, which is definitely a pain in the ass, because civil fines or civic fines are always a pain in the ass, because they're always more times than not expensive. But yeah, this is not a case of the state trying to compel women to do anything. It's a clear-cut case of discrimination based on gender identity.
Yeah, they are really big questions, and this is precedent setting. So why? It took the post-millennial, and then, my website covered it also, Feminist Current, to get this story out, and the mainstream media in Canada wasn't covering it at all. And since there's been some op-eds and some coverage of it, but, it really took them a long time, and still many of those outlets and sites have not covered it. The CBC still hasn't address this case at all. Why do you think that is?
Maybe because it's
There's
not
been
the mountain
from
that
a lot
you
of
guys
media organizations in Canada. A lot of those organizations, it's impossible for me to speculate as to all the reasons, but I think that we can reasonably ascertain some of them. One of my clients went to 26 different lawyers before she found the Justice Center, and we took her case on a pro bono basis. And what she said is that the lawyers that she went to didn't want to take this case because they're afraid of the trans lobby, they're afraid of their reputation, they're afraid of aligning their good name with the cause of a woman who has been, there's a complaint against her that she's a bigot, she's a transphobe. They don't want to take that case, right? And also, there's not a lot of money in these cases. There's a lot of work sometimes, but there's not a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And so, but those were the reasons that were given to my client. So 26 different lawyers, and when she found us, and when we took her case, and ultimately speaking, the complaint against her was withdrawn, she said that she wept big, ugly tears in relief. And so you take that situation and you apply it to the Canadian media, and who has been aggressively promoting certain social narratives for a number of years here, and this is the extension of these laws and these ideas. It's the logical progression of them, and the media is silent, and that's too bad, because Canadians have a right to know, and Canadians get their information, their news from the internet, and if Canadian media is boycotting important cases like this, you have a media that's not doing its job, and you have an ignorant populace who has a right to know what's going on.
Yeah.
So.
Maybe the media isn't necessarily boycotting it as much as they don't really view it as important enough. I'm not saying that oftentimes, I'm not saying that the media is right in regards to their agenda setting. As a person in the States, our mainstream media is pretty fucked up in the thing when they have their agenda setting meetings, and what they decide to put out there in the world. Most times it's pretty fucked, and it has been fucked, especially for marginalized groups, for a very, very long time. In regards in Canada, though, which for a while has been a bit more forward in these types of situations, even more so than the United States. That's not to say that Canada doesn't have its issues, because it definitely does, but at least in regards to enfranchising certain marginalized groups, it definitely has been a bit more forward than the United States has. So in regards to this case, maybe mainstream Canadian media doesn't really see this as the end-all be-all issue that Jay and Meghan seem to think it is. And like, when it comes to things like these, only most times when it comes to like cases like these, trans music folks will be like, oh my god, the media isn't covering this, and da 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 da. You know what else the media isn't covering, but I don't see you guys harping on about it? The high numbers of Indigenous women in Canada who are being killed or go missing and haven't been found in like decades and shit. But I don't see Meghan or this guy crying spilled milk over that. I wonder why. I don't see them crying about that not being, the focus of mainstream media in Canada. Quite interesting, don't you think?
it's shocking. It's
We're almost through,
so
guys. About
unethical,
10 more
especially,
minutes.
as you say, considering that all of these media outlets in Canada, you know, the mainstream media in Canada has been promoting and reporting on the issue of gender identity and, you know, transgenderism and gender identity legislation just endlessly. You know, the CBC talks about this stuff all the time, but only from one angle and in a completely biased way. You know, they've not produced any critical coverage. And, you know, so they're
critical based on whose standards? Hers? We already know that gender critical is a euphemism for being gender critical. We already know it's a euphemism for trans exclusion. So yeah, a government and media that is inclusive of all its citizens will not be passing around propaganda that's exclusionary of certain parts of its citizenry. I mean, if they're, sorry.
responsible in large part for promoting these narratives, and then when something like this comes along to disrupt the narrative, suddenly they're silent. You know,
it doesn't disrupt the narrative. Like this one case of a trans woman with a very sketchy past of being, you know, not even sketchy. This trans woman who has a past of being a sexual predator does not disrupt or refute the validity of the existence of trans people. Or, you know, or more specifically in Meghan's case, trans women. Sorry, like it just doesn't happen. And if someone, and you know, as you know, she's a feminist, right? If someone were making claims about the entirety of the group of women and that was bullshit, then she would have a fit about that, because we all know that no group is a monolith, right? But somehow when it comes to groups that a group that she doesn't like or doesn't accept, you know, trans women, then of course this one case is, you know, this one case or any case of, you know, of a trans woman, you know, doing something negative or something like that, it always affects the entire group, never just that one individual. And that's another thing that bothers me when it comes to cases like this. You know, when it comes to you know, marginalized groups, anytime one person or a couple of people within the group do something, then automatically, you know, the entire group is affected, or the entire group is tainted or whatever. And it's not true. It's bullshit. You know, so, or I take that back, except when it comes to like conservatives. I'm based on recent happenings and just, you know, these past, you know, months of, you know, of dealing with this, you know, dealing with the administration of the current occupant in the White House. Yeah, American conservatism is fucked, and I just don't rock with it. I can't really rock with anyone who is a conservative, regardless of what flavor it is, because it all, little by little, just helps to perpetuate all the fuckery that we see today, period. But I digress. Yeah, like, sorry Meghan, but Jessica Yaniv being a sexual predator does nothing to refute the existence and the humanity of trans women, nor does it mean that that the entirety of trans women, it does not mean that the entirety of women who have penises and scrotums are sexual predators who who want to compel women to wax their genitals. You know, it's just, it's no different from that stupid, trans women are just women who want to compel lesbians who want to make lesbians have sex with them. Like, really? Really? Almost done. I know I keep saying that.
I mean, it destroys trust, right? You know, we can't trust our public broadcaster to do their jobs.
Yeah, Pravda.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So, 3 of the women settled in mediation. Is that correct?
It's probably more than that.
Okay.
But it's hard to say. There were 16 complaints at least total. We know that. And 2 of the complaints against clients that we represent were withdrawn. And then there was another complaint against another salon that was also withdrawn. But there's no doubt that some of the complaints have been settled. I don't know what the terms were. I don't know if money was paid. I don't know if further concessions were made. A year worth of free Brazilians, Brazilians, right?
Boy, I tell you, there's nothing like seeing casual bigotry unfolding right in front of you. It's like once folks become really comfortable with each other and they see that their ideologies align when it comes to groups that they dislike equally or don't consider, dislike and don't consider to be human, you'll see them like show their true colors casually, like gangbusters, like clockwork. It's an amazing sight to behold, Bro, yeah, yes, a trans woman getting, brozillions because, she's not a woman, it's a man.
Who knows what the settlement terms were, but the cases are no longer on the books. They didn't proceed to the hearing, and they're finished. So,
And so how many of the complaints are being heard right now?
So there's 3 more to go. We ran trials on July 4th, 5th, and 17th, and there are 3 more that are being heard on July 26th, and those are all circumstances where the respondents haven't replied, and so very likely they're not going to show up. They've closed their businesses. I don't know if they've fled the province, but they've lost their livelihood over these complaints, and I don't know if they're going to be there to defend against them or not. They may just have gone into hiding. And when you see the difficulties in the case, you can understand why that might be, right? The state doesn't appoint them with a lawyer like it does in criminal cases. There's a stigma attached to being labeled a transphobe or a bigot.
As there rightly should be. Bigots really have no place in modern society. I can't personally ascertain their motives on why they did what they did. I can only speculate, but when it comes down to it, I'm not really too sympathetic when people make bigoted choices and they suffer the consequences for them. Far be it from me to wish folks loss of their livelihood unless they're Milo Yiannopoulos and Richard Spencer, excuse me. Fuck those guys. Fuck all the white supremacists. I hope all of them lose their livelihoods. But yeah, this part is a bit more complex for me because yes, I I am understanding and empathetic when it comes to if you're running a side hustle and something happens and you have to sort of uproot yourself and go elsewhere because you're facing difficulties because of the thing that made you uproot is a hindrance, is an obstacle to you being able to support yourself and your families. At the same time, again, having bigoted perspectives garners negative consequences when you're held accountable at times. So
and so they're afraid, and then there's the risk of punitive fines against them as well. So a lot of these people are from racial minorities, and they don't know the process. They don't have any experience with the Human Rights Tribunal. It's a bewildering process, and so they haven't responded, and they've made decisions to just try and ride it out as best they can.
Yeah, this kind of what makes this is with them being racial, ethnic, non-white peoples of color, non-white and non-black peoples of color. Excuse me, if they're non-white, then they are people of color. Sorry. When it comes to women of color having their livelihoods threatened, yeah, it becomes much more complicated for me. Especially, like, again, as I said, Jessica could be lying. She also, because she's white passing, she could also have gone out of her way to pick out these places and demand service, and in being refused, get in her white feelings and try to go out of her way to damage the livelihood of these women of color. And that's what makes this case even more complicated. Yes, she's a sexual predator. Yes, it is possible that that her and her white privilege and everything, feeling that she can just go to these little places and and get serviced, and if they don't service her, she could have gotten in her white feelings and like, oh, I'm gonna fuck up your livelihood, because it has happened, and it does happen, so that to me makes this case more complicated. But these two try to complicate it more with their transmesia. Like, it could have been much less complex if not for these two fucking poisoning the well.
Yeah, I mean, that would be so stressful and intimidating, I can imagine. And and what made me mad is that initially, Yaniv, his name was under a publication ban, and yet the women that he filed complaints against were not protected in that way. So these women who are worried about being harassed and are feeling totally intimidated, are worried about being, as you say, labeled as a transphobe and stigmatized in that way, they weren't protected at all. And yet Yaniv, the one who was targeting these people, was.
Yeah, and there's a presumption that a court process or a tribunal process is going to be open so that the public can see what's happening, right? Because it's a state-run body, and citizens have rights. And so for that reason, the presumption is that, there's got to be sunshine, right? Let it in. Mm-hmm. And so when the publication ban was sought, it was, it was an anomaly. And eventually, once there was sufficient evidence to show a variety of things, we applied to lift the publication ban, and the tribunal agreed that it was appropriate to lift it to protect the integrity of the process.
So that's not normal. That's not routine to do a publication ban on names of complainants.
It's not typical, right? Typically, and you can see why that would be the case, right? Because somebody like Yaniv has made upwards of 20 complaints now to the tribunal on a variety of issues. And if you can make complaint after complaint after complaint and hide behind anonymity, but your victims are out there in the public, then that becomes a problem, right? And so for that reason, typically complainants are also identified so that there's equal, I don't know if I can use the word, accountability.
I don't know if it's a measure of equal accountability. I don't know if it's an issue of accountability more than it is about maybe the accused have the right to know who's accusing them. In certain instances, I would understand a publication ban if it were a person of a marginalized group who is going against a bunch of folks in the majority, then I could if the complainant wanted to remain anonymous, I in that instance I definitely understand. So it really depends. It really depends on the situation. So I try to take things like this on a case-by-case basis. And in this case, I do agree that the women who were accused, I do think that they have a right to know who's accusing them. If only because of the aforementioned imbalance, but but that's about it. It's not necessarily about accountability. It's just I guess have things on an even keel.
I was going to say skin in the game, but yeah, equal accountability.
Yeah, that works too.
Yeah.
Jay is also the lawyer is also being safe now, referring to Jessica by her last name, so he doesn't have to think about so it's sort of it's a cover to save his ass while Meghan is doing all the misgendering and the dead naming, even though in some of the explanations that he in some of his statements he pretty much misgendered Jessica.
Yeah, totally. Oh, that makes me so angry. So how, I'm sure lots of people are wondering, how are these women that you're representing doing? You can't speak to everyone, but it's incredibly stressful. How are they coping with all this?
Across the board, there was tremendous stress. Like I said, one of the women who had the complaint withdrawn against her after we got involved told me that she wept because she had been suffering tremendous anxiety and fear for the last 5 months, right? But these complaints were made in April 2018. We're in July 2019. And so the women who have had complaints made against them have had this hanging over their head for over a year. And in some of the cases, it's been just debilitating for them because they're afraid. They're not familiar with the process. They've had to close their salon business, so they've lost the income, and they're afraid. And some of them are on medication. They're depressed. They're anxious. There's marital discord. One of them has, her evidence was at the tribunal that she put on a tremendous amount of weight because she's just terrified. And if anybody who has ever been through a court process or a tribunal process can attest to the fact that it's scary. because it's high stakes for them, right? And so it's they've suffered a lot. All of them have suffered. Some of them have suffered tremendously, and it's not an exaggeration to say that it's wrecked their life for like the last year and a bit.
And so I'm also wondering, on that note, how people can support these women. Is there anything that the public can do?
Yeah, some people very graciously have set up a GoFundMe page to help some of the women who have been the subject of these complaints, and they're raising money right now. And you can find that on Twitter. I think it's called the Sisterhood Fund.
Yeah, I'll link to it in the notes on YouTube.
Okay, great. And then, of course, the Justice Center operates as a.
Let me see. I'm at 27:55, and yeah, the video is 29 minutes and 3 seconds. So I think I can stop here now, because I think I've pretty much made all the points that I need to make, especially in regards to Meghan Murphy being a trans music, or being trans music. Regardless of the work that she's done, whatever work she's done as a feminist, I do believe that now, based on her bigotry, that work needs to be called into for review, because we all know that our biases color our expressions, our interpretations of the world. And so now, one can't help but look at all the work, whatever work that she's done, and see that as tainted because of her bigoted views, because of her reductionist definition of what being a woman is and of what womanhood is. So I hope that this has been informational. I hope you guys gained some insight on all of this. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching. Normally, this is pretty much, I think this is kind of the first time I've done like these outright reply to videos that either I haven't seen all of it, or I just haven't seen it at all yet. I may do some more of these, because it kind of feels like live replies, or replying to videos that just pop up on your feed right away, just watching and replying right away. It seems like that format is kind of the rage nowadays. So I may do more of these. I do kind of enjoy making scripts more, because it allows me to get all my thoughts out. But if you guys like these, I can do more of these. Thanks for watching, and talk to you later. Also, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Peace out.